Man, is this going to be a fun-filled show. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into this episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I am Ryan Thomas, and of course, I'm always really happy to be behind the microphone for another episode of my show. A lot to dive into tonight. In regards to the sports world, obviously. Keeping up the tabs with what's going on. We're at a very interesting time right now within the sports world. We're approaching the Super Bowl, which is the biggest of the biggest, the best of the best, going head-to-head. The San Francisco 49ers of the NFC and the Kansas City Chiefs of the AFC. It's safe to say I've already put out my prediction for this year's Super Bowl. I do believe the 49ers are going to get it done. I think they're just the better team. And top to bottom, offensively, defensively, I'm just going to go with whoever I think is the best team out of those two. I think the 49ers are better than the Chiefs. Now, the best team doesn't always win, of course. That's sports. That's the Super Bowl for sure. So you never know what's going to happen, right? And that's what makes the game so entertaining, so much fun. And granted, I'm not too crazy about either team. Nothing against the 49ers, but I definitely don't want to see the Kansas City Chiefs win yet another Super Bowl as my Bills continue to fall behind. So that being said, of course, I will be providing a great post-game recap show to the Super Bowl on the following day, what will be Monday morning, quarterbacking the Super Bowl with a very special guest. So feel free to tune into that episode, previewing that. I will have that guest on the following day after the Super Bowl is over as well. Really looking forward to diving into a lot of things regarding, baseball season coming up, and some other topics. So stay tuned for that. Okay, stay tuned for sure. So with that being said, it's time to dive into the discussion of the Lamar Jackson MVP season. Now, I put out a video today on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast Facebook page where I went hard in the paint, whatever you want to call it. The kids say threw some fire at Lamar Jackson, and I don't think I was wrong. And to kind of just recap what I stated, a recap of what that video meant to me and why I put it out in the form and fashion and how I put it out and what I said. To me, it's what have you done for me lately in this league and a lot of sports, with the four major sports, let's just say, National Football League, Major League Baseball, National Basketball Association, National Hockey League. They all have you feeling like, okay, if you lose the last game of the year, as Brad Pitt said in Moneyball, nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares what type of season you had. If you play that last game of the year and you lose in a losing effort, despite those efforts being what they were, not so great. And what I mean by that is Lamar Jackson's last game, the AFC Championship game against Kansas City, was his worst game of the year, by far. There was no close second to how poorly he played. At one point in that game, he dropped back to throw a pass, and the pass was deflected right in front of him by a guy that was on the D-line, and he had to run under the ball and catch it. And everyone said, wow, what a great play that Lamar had just made. Another great play that Lamar had just made. Lamar is great. Lamar is this. Lamar is that. And I'm sitting there thinking, if it was Josh Allen making that play, if it was Joe Burrow making that play, Kyler Murray making that play, Justin Herbert making that play, really any other quarterback outside of Mahomes and Jackson making that play, you would have a commentator saying, man, he takes too many chances, and that's why he had to catch his own pass. But because it was Lamar Jackson, everybody's feeling like, man, he's at home. Everybody's thinking, based on the narrative that this media is selling, man, this guy's so great. He's this, he's that. He's so electric. Meanwhile, they only scored 10 points in that game. and they had plenty of opportunities to score, and they literally could not even get in field goal range for Justin Tucker to put a couple field goals on the board to help this team rise above the Chiefs. And yes, I know the Chiefs' defense has been very good as opposed to previous years where they haven't really been as good. And the Chiefs' offense has been what's helped them get to their Super Bowls the last few that they've been to. But their defense this time around largely was why they were able to get to the Super Bowl this time around. So to me, I really feel like this year, this 2023-2024 season is a really hard one to kind of turn the page from, due to this award being handed out in the form and fashion that it was. And to me, I don't know how anyone can look forward in MVP, most valuable player type discussions and say to themselves that any other player other than a quarterback is in the realistic expectation of winning this award. This award, this most valuable player award, is a quarterback award. It should be the most valuable quarterback in the NFL, not most valuable player, because player is not the case. In previous years it was, but in this new generation of, I don't even know what to call it, sensationalist football, I guess, the history books are being rewritten. Each and every year this MVP discussion comes about. You have quarterback, not a 2,000-yard receiving wide receiver, not Cooper Kupp, not Calvin Johnson, not Tyreek Hill, certainly not a 2,000-yard running back like Christian McCaffrey in what would be, almost pretty much multiple years. As he's on the road to Canton, Ohio, whether he wins on this Sunday, a Super Bowl or not, in my opinion, I'd vote for him for the Hall of Fame right now. So this award, the Most Valuable Player Award, is not a MVP award. It is an MVQB award. And to me, when you look at who was given the award in Lamar Jackson, you look at his last game, Ravens versus Chiefs, AFC Championship game, you look at both those teams, the team that won, the team that lost, how they won, how they lost. Team one, won, team two lost. How did that shake out, right? And you'd honestly say to yourself that Lamar Jackson was the worst player on the field in that game. There was no player more important in that game to be successful for the Ravens, to get over the hump and to get that win. And yet Lamar Jackson was the worst player out on the field. So how is he rewarded? He's rewarded with an award from that performance. I know that's not the exact way it's looked at. That's the way I look at it, though. And I look at it that way because I watch the Ravens all season long. You're keeping tabs on the AFC, being that the team that I root for every year is within the AFC, the Buffalo Bills. So I want to know where some of these other teams are at. I want to understand how Buffalo should be put in the pecking order of these AFC teams. And when doing that, the Ravens were atop the charts all season long. 1, 2, 3 seed, working their way up to the 1 seed. And to me, I would make, jokes to my friends about it, and they would kind of laugh and posture with me on these jokes that I'd make. And they'd say, "Do you really believe this?" And I said, "Yeah, the Ravens are frauds. They will not win more than 2 playoff games, and they'll go home. AFC Championship game, at best, they'll go home. They're not going to go to the Super Bowl." I was on the record on this show and many others that whoever won the game in the AFC divisional round between the Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills would represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. And I felt like during the season, if it was the Chiefs versus the Niners, that the Niners would win. If it was the Niners versus the Bills, that the Niners would win. The Niners, to me, are the best team in the game right now, which is why I'm picking them against the Chiefs. So maybe I spared myself a little bit more heartache due to Tyler Bass kicking it wide right to end that game rather than tie it. from seeing the Bills lose what would be their 5th Super Bowl in franchise history. Their 5th Super Bowl, 0-5 in the modern era of Super Bowls, based on my take. I think that's a pretty valid take. So, looking at this, if I didn't think the Ravens were going to go to the Super Bowl, they certainly wouldn't have won it if they had beaten KC. But I knew that they were going to lose to KC. And I largely knew that they'd lose to KC because Lamar Jackson is not a quarterback that, when his defense is not playing at an exceptionally high level, he can't go Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. He can't go Lamar Jackson versus Pat Mahomes. He can't go Lamar Jackson versus Joe Burrow if the defense isn't giving him ample opportunities. Lamar Jackson needs more opportunities to do more, rather than making more out of the limited opportunities that he has. Whereas on the flip side of this, guys at Lamar Jackson's own position, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow when healthy, and Patrick Mahomes, they make the most out of every opportunity that they are given. So there is a huge discrepancy in how Lamar Jackson is viewed among quarterbacks in the league. Am I saying that Lamar Jackson's a bad player? No, I am not. That would be wrong. I would be wrong to say Lamar Jackson's a bad player. I would also be wrong to say Lamar Jackson's a great player. He's a very good player. Is he an elite top 5 quarterback? I can't say that. I can't quite say that. Is he a top 6 guy, top 7? I think that's where I'd put him. But to put him out ahead of just talent for talent, player for player, Lamar Jackson ahead of Patrick Mahomes, can't do it. Lamar Jackson ahead of Josh Allen, can't do it. Lamar Jackson ahead of Jalen Hurts, again, can't do it. Joe Burrow, if I didn't say that already, can't do it. Justin Herbert, stays healthy, of course, can't do it. Those, to me, are the best 5 quarterbacks that the league has to offer. And Lamar does not fit within those 5 guys. I would take those 5 guys in general over Lamar Jackson. And maybe potentially even a few others, just based on Lamar's inability to pass in big moments, as well to go drive for drive with the game's best. And that's the guy that just won the MVP award. So it's a very unique discussion. It's a controversial one because I feel like people are starting to use Lamar Jackson for different purposes. We're talking about football. We're talking about the gridiron. We know Lamar Jackson's a very good player. I just don't know if he's a great player. I think there's a difference, right? So that's my take on Lamar winning MVP. And really, as a whole, the award has taken serious damage over the course of how the NFL has manipulated it, tweaked it, modified it, to where it's really just an NFL quarterback award. And I don't like that. If it's going to be the MVP moving forward, you have to include everybody in this discussion. It can't just be NFL MVP quarterback award, offensive player of the year, then goes to the guy that should have won the MVP as well. Christian McCaffrey was robbed. This is not a Josh Allen should have won MVP award. But if it is a most valuable quarterback award, then I guess you could say Lamar Jackson should win that, because at the same time, there's no more quarterback more valuable. There's not one quarterback more valuable to his team, because I don't think the Ravens are that good. Whereas the Bills got pieces around them. KC, Travis Kelce's pretty damn good outside of that. Pacheco, there's pieces. The Ravens, they haven't really had any pieces around Lamar Jackson since day one. So he has made the most of limited talent, but at the same time, I still can't put him in that great discussion. So there's my take on that. Now, moving on to the Buffalo Bills, of course, I know everybody's really chomping at the bit for off-season coverage. We're not quite there yet. We still got the Super Bowl, but I'd be remiss to tell you guys that it's not on the front of my mind. So the front of my mind off-season-wise, the off-season, I love to approach the off-season like this. I like to look at the off-season, and I like to say to myself, how can I look at this off-season to show what the Bills can and should do to make themselves better? What do we got to do to kind of go back to the drawing board? How do we put this blueprint back together to get the Bills back to where they need to be, which is the Super Bowl, right? And to me, just judging off of what I saw in 2023, 2024, my first podcast that I did after the Bills lost in the AFC divisional round, after being eliminated yet again by the Kansas City Chiefs, was one in which I talked about what the Bills should do, how they should approach this offseason. And the biggest point that I made was their wide receiver 2 discussion. Now, right now, it's well known that the Bills are going to be undergoing some changes that they have not had to become accustomed to really in the last 6 to 7 years. And a lot of that is a credit to Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott. A lot of that is a credit to the players for actually achieving their full potential and the coaching staff and helping develop those players. And some of those players are free agents even heading into this offseason. AJ Epinesa being one of them. My main priority as far as a re-signing type player for the Buffalo Bills. They need to draft, develop, retain. That's their motto. If that's their motto, AJ Epinesa has to be a very high priority for this team. But another high priority in terms of decision-making is what to do with the wide receiver 2 position. And wide receiver 2 has been filled by Gabe Davis these last few years. And that's had some really great results, and it's had some really poor results. So you come to the middle and say, where is Gabe Davis? Is he an elite player? Is he a good player? Is he an average player? I think kind of splicing the very good with the not so great or very bad, very limited as far as production-wise, would say that Gabe Davis is an average wide receiver. And that's okay. If you're an average wide receiver in the NFL, you're going to produce no matter where you go. It's just not going to be consistent top of the line production that the Bills really need. So with that being the case, then what do the Bills do about it? Do they continue down that path of keeping that player and trying to work through those struggles, trying to figure out what it is that's, forcing Gabe Davis to be either very, very good some weeks or very, very poor in other weeks? And I think that it's a discussion that's worthy, right? He had done some really great things. But when I look at salary cap, that adds another caveat to the story, to the situation. And Gabe Davis is a player that truthfully, I feel he could go out and test the open market in any year and he could get overpaid by anybody just based on the economics, the business that is the National Football League. And to the team that decides to pay Gabe Davis $12, $13, $14, $15 million in a season, God bless them. I'm not saying they're wrong for that. That's their decision. If that does come to pass, if that does come to be a reality where Gabe Davis signs a new deal with a new team and he's making those figures per year, I wish him the best. I said the same thing about Tremaine Edmonds. I'd say the same thing about Gabe Davis or any player that leaves the Buffalo Bills to head for greener pastures. Good for you. The Bills are not at that point. They want to spend their money wisely. They're not exactly at a point where they have money to spend. So if that's the situation that presents itself, so be it. The question is, looking at the Bills, how do they move forward if, in fact, Gabe Davis does go to another team? Because there's no guarantee that he will. But I think it's safer to say that he could. And if he does, what are some of the wide receiver 2 options for the Buffalo Bills? And to me, this is more about Stephon Diggs than it is about the Bills' need for a wide receiver 2. And I'll explain that. And it's not to the level that you guys will think. The reason Stephon Diggs is such a huge, integral part of this storyline is more so due to the fact that I believe on the field, not off the field, but on the field, Stephon Diggs has been carrying a heavy, heavy workload as a wide receiver 1, the likes of which no other receiver really fulfills. And you see that drop-off from Diggs to Davis. You see that drop-off from Diggs to Brown or Diggs to Beasley. But at the same time, there was more production in the middle there with Beasley, with Brown, and with a more prime Davis in that role with Beasley as well. You saw the Bills go out adding Dalton Kincaid, new dimension, right? We know what that was for. Mismatches, tight ends on linebackers, tight ends on corners, size, reach, all that stuff, vertical, all that. We know why they went out and got Dalton Kincaid. We don't have to beat a dead horse there, but it's a big part of complementary football, their offense, moving the chains, finding the right pieces to the puzzle. And to me, I think this decision is just as important to find the wide receiver 2 that could potentially end up being their wide receiver 1 down the road. Because Stephon Diggs is not getting any younger. He's not old by any means, but that massive workload that he had maintained for a 4-year period is starting to become a little bit of a problem to the offense and to the player, to where by the season's end, you're not seeing 100-yard games from Stephon Diggs for the last, 10, 11 weeks of the year. And that's a real concern. When there's 2 halves of a season, the beginning and the middle, and then the end, because it's an 18-week year, each year, 18 weeks, you're not seeing that production, right, that you used to see from Stephon Diggs in 2020 and 2021. So, to me, you have to find a wide receiver 2 that is a legitimate option to be a solid 2, to work his way to a 1. How do you splice that together? I think that there are guys out there via free agency that this team could go out and acquire. On a 1-year deal, 2-year deal as that middle stopgap guy, wide receiver 2, but as well kind of supplanting that with a rookie wide receiver, maybe even 2 rookie wide receivers. And I think it goes back to the position as a whole last year. You had Diggs, you had Sherfield, you had Hardy, you had Gabe Davis. Those were their main 4 wideouts. And really, I felt like Sherfield and Hardy left a lot to be desired. I know that the season finale between the Bills and Dolphins led the Bills to getting that divisional crown. And a lot of that had to do with Deontay Hardy and Trent Sherfield. But outside of that, there really wasn't much contribution throughout the majority of that season from either guy, especially in the case of Sherfield. I wouldn't really say necessarily quite the same thing in regards to Hardy, but Sherfield didn't really do a ton. Hardy contributed on the punt return. He made some nice run-after-catch plays here and there in pockets in games. They weren't very, explosive, but they got more explosive as the season wore on. And that's going to be very interesting to see if they do bring one or both of those guys back. If it were me, I'd probably lean towards Hardy making a return rather than Sherfield, but that's just me. Regardless, wide receivers abound in this draft, whether it's Keon Coleman, Brian Thomas Jr., or another receiver, maybe Franklin. Maybe they go out and make a move to trade up for a receiver. Maybe they get a Dunzy. Maybe they get somebody like that. We'll see. It's not something that they haven't done before. They traded a lot of picks to take Stephon Diggs away from the Minnesota Vikings. So we'll see what happens. But make this very clear to the audience, as I like to. There's options, and that's good. It's good to have options. It's good to have options in the most glaring need on this team. To me, yeah, there's needs on this team, of course. Those could be due to a lack of depth. Those could be due to guys leaving the team on contracts. Those could be due to injuries at other positions where you might have to add another player at that position, corner, safety. The departure of Micah Hyde potentially could be a big deal for this team. But there's no clear need for your biggest asset in Josh Allen at the game's most important position than a wide receiver too. And if you get that right guy, and if the right guy fits the mold right away, and Dalton Kincaid, who I mentioned moments ago, takes that next step, then you're really going to put yourself in a better situation. And I think that Kincaid, for all intents and purposes, has shown that he is legitimate, that he was rightfully picked where he was picked, and that he was rightfully scouted as today's NFL tight end, which is great for Josh Allen. It's great for Joe Brady. It's great for Sean McDermott, who has had, a go of it these last couple years. So when I talk about the Bills and their needs, this is a need for now and their future. So it's the biggest need on their team. There are guys out there, Hollywood Brown, Kendrick Bourne, good players that are out there that might not cost a lot of money. And that's a good thing, right? Especially with the Bills and where they're at as far as their salary cap situation. Very curious to see how they break that down. Very curious to see how they piece this together. But make no mistake about it, that is the biggest need for the Buffalo Bills, their wide receiver 2 position. All right, so on to the next topic of discussion, the last topic of the night. And I'll keep this one short. I don't really dive into the entertainment business. In this case, World Wrestling Entertainment, the WWE. But I have to mention it. I'm a fan of the product. I'm a fan of The Rock. I'm a fan of professional wrestling. I've been a fan of professional wrestling ever since I was a little kid. Now, I'm not as big of a fan as some of the others out there, but I will tell you I followed it closely for a very long time, and I know the industry very well. I know how things are pieced together, and I know who are the greats, who are the legends, which matches are the most legendary, and right now is a very interesting time for the WWE. I look at it as kind of a rebirth, revitalization, because for a little while, the WWE was having some trouble bringing in fans. You had another organization come along the way, All Elite Wrestling, which was taking a lot of talent away from the WWE. Hey, here's a history lesson for you for all the diehard fans. A little bit of a Monday Night Wars situation. Similar, not quite, but you had WCW, WWF, then WWF kind of battling it out. And you're starting to see a lot of talent, right, go from the WWF at the time to the WCW. It's not quite like that, but it's close. It's similar. And that's interesting, especially given how long ago that was, the time that was, compared to the times of today. We are in a whole new world in the last 30 years. And to sit here and say that as a soon-to-be 32-year-old, I can make that estimation. I know things were a lot different 20 years ago even than what they were now. I know things were a lot different 10 years ago than what they are now. So businesses have changed. Companies have changed. Entertainment has changed, right? Everything's changed. Politics has changed. We could go into that for a moment. The world has changed, right? Whether it's for better or for worse, that's up for debate. But there's a lot of things that make that better. There's a lot of things that make that a little bit more challenging. But in this case, you always have history to fall back on. And you always have history to look back on and say, let's try to catch lightning in a bottle again by going back into the history books, Back to the Future. And they're doing that once again, bringing back The Rock. And there is no more entertaining a name, a value, a household name than Dwayne The Rock Johnson. He's the biggest superstar in the world. And I think that's great to get him back. It's great for the fans of yesteryear, great for the fans of the Attitude Era like myself. It's great for the fans now that didn't really get to experience that, to get to see him come back and make his mark. Are they as gung-ho about it as I am? Probably not. And that's also interesting. But to me, when you have these organic personalities that come out of nowhere, yeah, they're pushed, right, by the brass, by the head honchos, by the WWE. But when you have a Cody Rhodes that has had lots of peaks and valleys, trials and tribulations, you start to say to yourself, how's this going to end? What's the story going to be? What are they going to do with him? And I'm talking, 2-3 years ago when he returned to the WWE and wrestled Seth Rollins. That was probably the first time in a long time I was actually intrigued by what the WWE was doing. And I say that because gone are the days of The Undertaker. John Cena's on his last legs. He's made that abundantly clear. He's only got a couple years left, and he's doing these like one-off matches, and he's breaking down, right? He even admitted that to the pro wrestling aspect of things. I believe that this probably should be The Rock's last go at it as well. He's much older than the last time he was in the WWE ring. That was over 10 years ago when he wrestled Cena at WrestleMania, I believe. So, was it 2011, 2012, somewhere in that range? So, much different time for him as well, but you have these guys grow in these eras. Who are the big names? Who are the big storylines? And to me, I've been so guilty of this over the years, talking about the WWE, been so guilty of it, stating that, John Cena's gone, there's never going to be, how are they going to replace him? Oh, Stone Cold is gone, how are they going to replace him? Oh, Kurt Angle, he's going to TNA, how are they going to replace? They always find a way. They always find a way. To their credit, they always find a way. And that is really admirable. To be in a business as the business leader with the bullseye on your back, and to consistently find the top dogs and create the top dogs and recreate the top dogs over and over and over again. Whether it's for WrestleMania or just in general for Monday Night Raw. It's really amazing when you go and look at it era to era, personality to personality, gimmick to gimmick, whatever you want to call it. They've consistently found a way to be atop the industry. And that's impressive. It's very impressive. Now, that's the point I'd like to make on this, because right now, the way things are, WrestleMania, really important, right? Super Bowl of professional wrestling. Getting that event right is what sets the tone for the next calendar year until the next one. So they got to get that right to then build off of that WrestleMania to build off of the rest of the year. And if they get it wrong, you're really, behind the eight ball and trying to piece together how to get this calendar year right. It's happened before. They have gotten WrestleMania wrong. They have had guys or gals that just didn't work. And I would say, that's happened a lot in recent years. So to get this one right is crucial for the WWE. It's crucial for the wrestling business. And whether it's Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns or The Rock versus Roman Reigns, that to me doesn't necessarily matter as much as it does to other people. What matters more is what do they do in establishing whether it's that matchup or not. And I think we're actually in for something that we least expect. I mean, judging off of that presser yesterday, I got a feeling that we're going to be going on a fun, wild ride. Because I'm just as confused as to anyone whether Roman Reigns is actually wrestling Cody Rhodes in the main event at WrestleMania or not. Is it going to be Roman versus Cody, but The Rock's coming in? Or is it going to be like this new bloodline storyline where The Rock and Roman Reigns team up, turning into this like NWO type thing with the bloodline, with The Rock, Roman Reigns, the Usos, and Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes team up? Because Seth Rollins is a big part of this, and he's not even involved in the main event of WrestleMania, but what they're doing, how they work this, Seth Rollins could easily be a part of it, and he should be, to be honest. I feel like there's no greater worker in the company right now than Seth Rollins, as well as Cody Rhodes, right? But Seth Rollins predating Cody Rhodes and the departure and all that stuff, CM Punk and his departure and all that stuff, he's been tried and true WWE for the better part of the last decade. So that has to be rewarded. There has to be some sort of, traction there for Seth Rollins to bounce off of. And I'm looking forward to seeing how they get it done. I really am. I think that this is a WrestleMania that I would definitely tune into. Of course, usually that is something I tune into every year. But there's been a great focus by Triple H the powers that be to really pre-build it rather than just throwing everything together, hoping that people like it on the night. They're setting the track and they're putting the train on the tracks for something. And that's exciting. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in.